Good afternoon and Hari Om to all. So again we are meeting for one more system. So before we start, we'll start with Om chanting. Please sit straight with the eyes closed gently. Palms on the thighs. Shoulders collapsed. Elbows relaxed. Experience the posture of the body. The back is straight but relaxed. Because of the posture, the breathing is becoming slow. Experience the slow incoming and outgoing breath. We'll chant one Om. Exhale fully. Inhale. Rub the palms on each other. Apply the warmth around the eyeballs. Gently bring the hands down and open the eyes. So last time we had discussed a digestive system. Now we are going to discuss respiratory systems. As we had discussed, digestive system provides the nutrients to the body, and this is a system which provides the oxygen to the body. So both these systems provide nutrition, or we can say that in our yogic parlance, we can say that both of the systems provide prana to the body. So these systems help us to get prana from outside so that the body can utilize that prana inside, that energy can utilize. So we are going to discuss the respiratory system. As per the structure which we observed last time, we will discuss anatomy part first, then physiology, that means that function, and then the yogic correlation. At the same time, just like last time, there will be references or rather cross references. So it will not be watertight compartment. While going through the anatomy, we can have reference to physiology also and yogic correlation also. So we'll begin this. Initially, we had discussed about the body cavities. So we had discussed in the first lecture, the initial lecture, that there are three main cavities of the body. One is the abdominal cavity, one is the thoracic cavity, and one is the skull. In the digestive system, we had discussed mostly the abdominal cavity because most of the digestive system is located in the abdominal cavity. Today, we are going to discuss one system which is located in the thoracic cavity. It is not the only system, but one system which is located in the thoracic cavity, and we are going to discuss that. And I have specifically showing you the diagram so that we should come to know the correlation between different systems, because as we had discussed already, a system does not work in a single manner. So they always work in a coordinated manner and integrative manner. So that's why we need to remember the relationship between the parts of every system with other system so that we get an overall view. Because what happens that when we study the system separately, at the end of it, we feel that everything is separate. So it's not that. The ultimate aim is to develop the understanding how these systems are working together in an integrative manner so that we can have better understanding of the function of our body. Otherwise, we'll just compartmentalize ourselves that this is respiratory, so nothing to do with digestive or nothing to do with circulatory. It's not like that. So ultimate aim is to understand the working of the system with each other so that ultimately as a therapist, we can have better understanding of the disease process, because we'll see later on when you be told about the diseases, even though the disease is specific to a particular system, it does have effect on the other parts of the other systems as well. So that there is a need to understand that. So we must remember always when you are discussing systems that we are just discussing systems for the sake of learning. So these systems were not made as separate systems by the nature or the God, whoever has made our body. So that's why at the outset, I want to show this picture to you. As you can see here, thoracic cavity has got two important organs. One is the heart and one is a pair of the lungs. And abdominal cavity, as we discussed last time, there are so many important organs located in the abdominal cavity. And these are just separated by the diaphragm in between. So whatever happens in this cavity will have some some repercussion in this cavity, and whatever happens in thoracic cavity will have repercussion on the abdominal cavity. And ultimately, everything is a central effect. That means that the brain, the skull, we had discussed the third important cavity is the skull. The skull contains brain. So ultimately, the relationship between the brain and all the systems is very essential to understand, especially for yoga practitioners. So that should be our focus. So straight away we'll start with describing respiratory system. Please give me 1 second. Systems are connected. So because we have thoracic cage, then there are certain advantages. This is a protective mechanism of the whole thoracic structures, because in the thorax or in the chest cavity, there are two very critical structures which are lying there, which is called as heart and lungs. So those are critical for continuation of life. If the heart stops or if the lungs stop, then the life cannot go on. So these are the very critical structures, and that's why they are provided with the protection called as thoracic cage. Of course, there are other functions of thoracic cage we'll discuss later on. So this is thoracic cage. So even though it is part of skeletal system, it is included in the respiratory system. Now we'll begin at the beginning. So there are nostrils, or in the scientific term it's called a nares. So there are two nostrils. One is the right nostril, one is left nostril. And in between the two nostrils, there is a structure called as nasal septum. So it is a thin cartilage structure in between two nostrils. And it is made up of cartilage. I hope you know the difference between cartilage and bone. Bone is much harder structure as compared to cartilage. So cartilage is a bone-like structure, but much softer as compared to the bone. Now, why there are two nostrils, left and right nostril? As one explanation is that, as we have discussed, that our body has got many organs in pairs. Our brain has got two sides, right side, left side, and some organs, of course, don't have, they are not in pairs, but many organs are in pairs. So similarly, the nostrils are in pairs. Of course, the modern science does not recognize the differentiation between right and left nostril. Of course, we yoga people have got a lot of importance to the difference between left and right nostril. So Ida Nadi and Pingala Nadi. So that's why the right and left nostril are important for us. Now the nasal septum is in between, lies between two nostrils, and also it passes further behind to cover part of the nasal cavity. Now the nasal septum naturally is never located exactly at the center. It differs from person to person. It's located slightly on one side. So the volume of both the right and left nasal cavities is not the same. It's just the structural build-up of our body. So it's never in the exact center. So we just need to remember that. It's not much significant, but it is a structure. Now, the inside of the respiratory tract is covered with mucous membrane. We had discussed mucous membrane, which is the inside covering of the digestive system also, and the respiratory system also. The inside, it is mucous membrane. Of course, there are differences between functions of mucous membrane of the respiratory system and that of the digestive system. So we had discussed last time that the digestive system mucous membrane secretes certain enzymes which aid in the or which are responsible for the digestion of the food. Here, the mucous membrane is a thin layer, or it is a soft layer which covers the system from inside, and it secretes a substance called as mucus. And also, there are thin hair-like substances or projections of that mucous membrane called as cilia. So cilia and mucus glands are located in the mucous membrane of the respiratory system. So this is the major difference between the respiratory system mucous membrane and the digestive system mucous membrane. So we'll see some pictures of that also later on. So basically the nostrils control the temperature of the air which comes inside the body, and it controls the flow, the rate of flow of the air inside the body. So we'll talk about temperature a little bit later on, but regarding the flow, as we understand, suppose we go to a place where is a storm going on outside. There's a storm going on outside where the air is very fast outside. So air is flowing very fast outside. So just outside the nose, the flow of air is very fast. But when we inhale the air inside, the nostrils are made in such a way that they will prevent that extra flow of the air. So they will regulate the airflow. So the airflow inside the nostril will be the same. I'm talking about the normal respiration. In case of normal respiration, the airflow is regulated by the nasal cavities. It is one of the important functions of the nostrils, because otherwise, if the air flows inside with a lot of pressure, then the structural damage will take place, and there is a protection for that structures inside the body. And that is one of the important mechanisms we need to remember about that nostrils or nasal cavities. So there is a mucus secretion, and at the beginning of the nostrils, the hair, tiny hairs are located. As you can see in this picture, everybody has got this hair inside the nose. So these filter the air out especially when we are, of course, nowadays in the cities, we are living in the polluted atmosphere. So whenever we inhale the air is physically filtered because of this hair. And next are the mucus secretions. The mucous membrane of the respiratory system is kept moist always, so it's never dry. As we know that skin is not that moist as compared to mucous membrane, and basically why we have this respiratory system and mucous membrane inside is because we have got a large surface area of the skin outside, but the skin is dry, skin is thick, and skin is not able to intake the oxygen inside our body. So if our skin was able to intake oxygen in the body, there was no need of respiratory system. But it's not so, and that's why this particular mucous membrane is present there and always kept moist, so that the air which we take inside the lung is never dry. So even though we are in a dry atmosphere outside, or we are living in desert, for example, where the air is there's a dryness of air. So when the air enters inside the respiratory system, it is made moist because it should not irritate the inside part of the lungs. So the air which goes in the lung is always moistened because of the secretions of the mucous membrane, and it protects from the dust particles also. So one is the physical filtration because of air, and second is the mucus is a very thick secretion, very sticky secretion, as we all experience, and the mucous membrane will catch the tiny dust particles and then throw it out. So we know that if we happen to go to some area where there's a lot of dust in the air, and if we inhale that, there will be attack of sneezing, because that a lot of mucus will be secreted because of stimulation of due to dust. The mucus will trap the dust, and the body will throw out the dust in the form of mucus thrown outside through the sneezing. So this is the protection for a protective mechanism, because even if a small speck of dust enters inside the dust, the lungs will get damaged, or there are tiny bronchioles which will get blocked because of dust particles. So body does not allow even the smallest of speck of the dust to enter inside the trachea. So even the trachea, suppose there is a lot of dust and it bypasses the nostrils, bypasses nasal cavity. Even though nasal cavity will secrete mucus, it will trap the dust particles, there will be physical filtration because of air, but still some particles are likely to bypass or still go inside the trachea. The trachea will not allow any speck of dust to enter. So we'll just discuss that when we discuss about trachea. So this is the protective mechanism of the body, throwing out of the dust particles, and only the clean air, which is warm, same as body temperature, and it is moist, so that is allowed to enter the lungs. So these are the three properties of the air which will enter our lungs. This is the outside of the bone. As we know that even the outside of the bone, there is a nasal bone at the tip of the, just below the forehead. There is the bone projection of the bone, which is called a nasal bone or nasal spine. And then from that, it continues as cartilage. As we know that the top of the nose is the bone, and below that is cartilage. Even from outside, even the sides is covered by cartilage, as we can see in the blue color, the blue cartilage. And in the right side figure, we can see the nasal septum in blue color, which is also made of cartilage. Now there are part of the nostril which is not covered with cartilage, which is a soft part of the nostril, which is covered only by the skin. Why I'm discussing is that because this is the part which we use when we are doing Anulom Vilom Pranayam or Surya Vedana Pranayam. Because we have to gently close the nostril, we are supposed to close the nostril. So we have to just give a mild pressure on this skin part, because if we know the structure, we know where to give that mild pressure. Otherwise, we keep on pressing here on the cartilage, nothing will happen because nostril will not get closed. The idea is in these pranayamas, we have to close one nostril. We should be able to close one nostril, and that nostril can be closed because of the skin part. If the nose was made up of cartilage only, then we would not have been able to do this Anulom Vilom Pranayam or Surya Vedana Pranayam. So because of this structure, we are able to do that. So just a mild pressure is required here to close the nostril, because many people have got a habit of pushing the nostril on one side while doing these pranayams. This is not required. Once we know the structure of this area or this part, we will come to know how we can utilize that for yoga practice. So that's why I've added this picture here. So these are various parts. We are not going to go into details of what this is called and what this is called as, but basically it's made up of cartilage. And that's why many times we come to know that when there are injuries of the nose, so the cartilage, it is less likelihood that cartilage will fracture, because cartilage is a soft bone-like structure, so it will bend. So any injury to the nasal cartilage can be corrected easily just by manipulation. And this bridge of the nose, or this upper part of the nose, which is nasal bone, it is likely to break. If it breaks, then some action has to be taken. Otherwise, it's quite easy to manipulate this cartilage, because cartilage is a soft bone-like structure. So it is elastic in nature, but not as elastic as the skin, but not as hard as bone also. Now we will discuss about nasal cavity. As we had seen the first picture, these are the nostrils or nares, as called as in scientific language. There are two openings of the nose here at the tip. Now there is a cavity inside called as nasal cavity. Now in nasal cavity, we can see that middle turbinate, inferior, there are folds here. On the side of the, of course, in the center, there will be septum, and both the sides of the nasal cavity, as we can see in this picture, there are folds-like structures. Why these folds are there? So that the surface area of the nose increases by many times because of these folds. This is one reason why folds are there. And because of folds, we get a resonance of the voice also. The resonance of the voice depends upon so many aspects. One aspect is the nasal cavity. And as you can see here, frontal sinus and sphenoidal sinus is seen here. Maxillary is not seen here because maxillary is located just inside the cheek. Now, this is also covered with mucous membrane, and the sinuses, even though it's not seen in this picture, the sinuses are joined with this nasal cavity. So there is a small opening of each sinus in the nasal cavity. So the mucous membrane of the nasal cavity continues in the sinus also. And that's why whenever we get infection of the nasal mucous membrane, it is very likely that that infection will be passed on to the sinuses, and we'll get something called as sinusitis, because the mucous membrane is in continuation. Even though the sinus cavities are separate, they are joined with nasal cavity with a small openings. They are not shown in the picture, but those openings are present there. So this is the nasal cavity, and then there is a palate. Below the nasal cavity, there is a palate. The palate is the roof of the oral cavity and is the base of the nasal cavity. So the palate divides the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. There are two parts of the palate. One part of the palate is called as hard palate. As you can see this diagram, this is made up of bone. And the back part of the palate is called as soft palate. It is made up only of muscle. So there is no bone inside that soft palate. And soft palate also has got important function to perform. Then as you can see in this figure probably, there are adenoid glands. So there are two types of lymphatic glands. I hope you know about the lymphatic tissue or lymphatic system. There are lymphatic glands called as adenoids, and below that there are tonsils. So these are the lymphatic glands. Of course, this is the gateway of the body for the air. So any infection enters, any bacteria, microorganism enter inside the nasal cavity through the air. They will be trapped by these glands, adenoid glands and tonsil glands. And these are the pairs of adenoids and tonsils located. Tonsils are located further down. Adenoids are just located at the back of the nasal cavity. And then you will find the eustachian tube orifice. You can see a small orifice here. This is the tube which connects to the middle ear. The throat or the pharynx connects with the middle ear through the tube called as eustachian tube. And the middle ear, it also has got important function of hearing, because the middle ear requires the atmospheric pressure of the air to be maintained, and that is maintained through eustachian tube. We all experienced that whenever we get an attack of a cold, common cold attack, the nose gets congested. Even these tubes will get congested and will perceive pressure on the ear. So even though the common cold is a disease of the nasal cavity, we will perceive a lot of pressure in the ear because that tubes are choked up or they are partly not open. And if the tubes are open, of course, we'll be having clear hearing. So hearing is connected indirectly because of this eustachian tube, because there is a need to maintain the atmospheric pressure of the air inside the middle ear also. So this is the eustachian tube. And then there are various nerves. We are going to discuss the nerve supply of the respiratory system, but this is called as olfactory nerves. As you can see, they are located at top of the nasal cavity, the roof of the nasal cavity. The roof of the nasal cavity is made up of the base of the skull. As you can see in this diagram, there is a bone, a thin bone covering which separates the nasal cavity from the skull. And then there is, of course, there are eyeballs on the sides, and then there is a brain inside. So the olfactory nerve, I think you have done nervous system. So olfactory nerve is the cranial nerve, is the first cranial nerve which starts directly from the brain. So the olfactory nerve has got have direct connection with the brain because this is part of the cranial nerves. Similarly, you will find nasopalatal nerve here. This is part of the cranial nerve also. So this is part of the trigeminal nerve called as trigeminal nerve, and this has got supply in the nasal cavity also. And there is third nerve which is called a septal branch of anterior ethmoidal nerve. So we need not remember these names. As a yoga practitioner, there is no need to remember these names, but we should be aware that different types of nerve endings located inside the nasal cavity, and that's why the nasal cavity or the mucous membrane inside nasal cavity is very, very sensitive. There are lot of thousands and lakhs of nerve endings located here, and these are the three nerves. Of course, olfactory nerve has got a specific function of the smell. The smell is detected by olfactory nerve, and as the air enters inside the nose, the air becomes warm. The air becomes warm, and that's why as we know that the warm air will go up as compared with cool air. So warm air will go up near the roof of the nasal cavity. Then if it contains specific molecules of the agents which gives a smell, the olfactory nerve will get stimulated. Suppose we get a sweet smell or we get a pungent smell. There are various smells which we can perceive. So the olfactory nerve will get stimulated. Immediately the message will be passed on to structure of the brain called as olfactory bulb. And through the olfactory bulb, the sensation will be passed on to the olfactory center, which is located near the temples inside the brain, and the processing will take place. One important aspect of the smell sensation is that it is connected with emotions. It is connected with emotions. When we perceive the smell, the perception of smell also, one of the structure, of course, the olfactory center is located in the brain. So that is the main center responsible for perceiving the smells. But also other parts of the brain also play a role in perception of the smell. Like for example, the part which is responsible for the emotional processing inside the hypothalamus is also responsible there. And that's why the smell is intimately connected with emotions and memories. So as we experience many times, a particular smell will evoke a particular memories. A particular smell will evoke a particular emotion inside us, whether it's positive or negative. So there are various facets of this smell. So when, of course, we are doing sense organs, we can discuss that. But there are various types of smell, and the smells are detected because of those molecules which are there in the air. And specific nerve endings will be sensitive to specific molecule, the specific aspect of smell. Smell is also protection for the our body, protective mechanism, especially if the toxic gases enter inside the nose. The olfactory nerve endings are much more sensitive to toxic gases as compared with any other smell. So that immediately that toxic smell will be detected, and immediately the motor part of the brain will be activated, and then the command will go to the muscles that you have to move away from the area where you are having that toxic smell, toxic gases. Otherwise, for example, carbon monoxide, gases like carbon monoxide, they will cause a lot of damage within no time. So that's why it is important aspect of protection of the body from the toxic substances entering inside the nose. These are olfactory nerve, and these are all sensory nerves. These are all sensory nerves located inside the nasal mucosa, and they are responsible for the various sensations which we perceive through the nose. As we know that a small dust particle, actually when we see some people, when they see the dust particle, that kind of sensation is evoked. So even though there is no dust particle touching the mucous membrane, the very thought of the dust particle touching the mucous membrane evokes the mucus secretion in some people. So some people are so sensitive, even though those molecules of dust don't touch that nerve endings, still they will have that sensation inside the nose. And nose has to be sensitive because it is required for the maintenance of our life, because there is a protection for the our maintenance of our life. And that's why nose is very important aspect. And as we know that as yoga practitioners, that many of the kriyas, especially the kriyas or neti kriyas, will help us in maintaining that sensitivity of that nose inside. Because we have a problem today, of course, we'll discuss that in diseases, that either this inside of nasal mucous membrane is oversensitive or less sensitive. So it's never optimum sensitive because of our lifestyle and where we live in the polluted atmosphere. So the kriyas will help us to regain that sensitivity. So that will not be extra sensitivity also and less sensitivity also. Where sensitivity is required for maintenance of our life. So this is the aspect of the nasal cavity. Now these are the terms which are used in the science, modern science language. So as we have discussed, pharynx. Pharynx is the back part of the nasal cavity. Where the nasal cavity ends, the pharynx starts. And there are three aspects of pharynx. One is called a nasopharynx, which is located just behind the nasal cavity. There is oropharynx. Oropharynx is a part of the throat which is located just behind the oral cavity. And hypopharynx is just below the oropharynx. So these are three parts of pharynx, or what we call as throat. The tonsils are located in the pharynx part on the back side, and of course the tonsils are not shown in this diagram. And then the pharynx further continues downwards as larynx. As you can see, this larynx or voice box, and the larynx will further continue as the trachea. So this is the pharynx. And as you can see, one important structure called as hyoid bone. It is not seen in diagram, very faint bone is seen there. Hyoid bone plays a great role because the tongue is attached to a hyoid bone. As you know that tongue is a muscular tissue, it is attached to a hyoid bone, and we can experience when we are gulping something, when we are swallowing something, that hyoid bone is raised. We can feel here, we try to gulp, and we can feel here with the fingers that we'll perceive that movement of the hyoid bone which goes up. And we just discuss that why it is important. So the hyoid bone, and then there is a larynx, and then it continues as trachea. This is the larynx part. So larynx part is covered with a cartilage called as thyroid cartilage. The thyroid cartilage, because thyroid gland is located just around this cartilage. That's why the name comes as thyroid cartilage. And we can feel that cartilage in the throat. Now, as we grow up, the males grow up with a larger thyroid cartilage as compared with females. So in males, the thyroid cartilage is larger as compared with females. And then there are other structures. As you can see, this hyoid bone is shown here, the hyoid bone, and these are the muscles shown here. So we'll not go into depth of that. Then there is a cartilage called as cricoid cartilage. Now this thyroid cartilage is covered only in the front, only in the anterior part, not in the back part. I hope the things are clear to everybody. So I am not going in very much depth. So, but these are the things which we need to know actually to know the structure of that system. So
please all reply and response, please.
Yes. If anything is there, we'll discuss later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a thyroid cartilage, and below the thyroid cartilage, there is a cricoid cartilage. Thyroid cartilage is not covering from backside; is only front side. The cricoid cartilage is covering from the backside as well. And then there are trachea. This is a trachea, and trachea is made of C-shaped rings. So it is very significant. As you can see, the blue structure called as the cartilage of the trachea. So the C-shaped rings, that means that they are covered only in the front side, not back part. So we'll see that diagram later on. So, and this is the back part of the larynx. As you can see, this epiglottis, very important structure. As you can see in the diagram, the epiglottis is attached to the thyroid cartilage. So epiglottis is made up of cartilage, cartilaginous part, very soft cartilage, and epiglottis is the door which selects where the food will go and where the air will go. So there is a dividing septum which either closes on the trachea or is open. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. So this is the epiglottis. Epiglottis is a thin structure. We can call it a doorway. And this is the front part of that thyroid cartilage, and this is the cricoid cartilage. And you can perceive here, this is a trachea. The cartilage of the trachea is C-shaped. So back part of the trachea is not cartilage. We see in the next diagram. The diagram will come later on. Now that this is a trachea, the trachea, while entering the lungs, is divided into two parts called as bronchi. This is one bronchi, this is the other bronchi. Now the right side lungs will have three bronchioles. So their bronchi will further divide in three parts because the right side lung has got three lobes. The left side lung has got two lobes. So left side bronchi will be divided only in the two parts, not in three parts, because there are two lobes only. And the left side bronchi are a little bit longer as compared to right side bronchi. But right side bronchi are more in diameter as compared to left side bronchi. And just for the knowledge, the bronchi will further subdivide into structures or tubes called as bronchioles. As we can see here, like the branches of the tree or branches of the root, they subdivide further into many small branches called as bronchioles. Now this right side diagram, this diagram is drawn from the behind, so that you can see this esophagus here, the food pipe esophagus. There are blood vessels, and just front of esophagus, this is a trachea. This will become clear in next diagram. This diagram we must remember as yoga people who are doing kriyas. As you can see here very clearly, this is a C-shaped cartilage of the trachea. This is the esophagus behind, and in between there is a septum which is made up of muscles. This is not made up of cartilage. So this esophagus and trachea, there is a thin separation between them which is not made up of any kind of cartilage or bone. It is just a muscular structure here dividing the trachea and the esophagus. The front part of the trachea is cartilage. Why there is a cartilage here and why there is no cartilage inside the esophagus? We need to know the logic behind that. As we know that we are not eating all the time. Of course, at least it's not expected that we should eat all the time. It is expected that we should eat only at particular time of the day. So the esophagus is in collapse state always. And only when the food enters the throat, the esophagus will be opened up. And there's peristalsis we had discussed last time. And while we need to keep on breathing 24 hours, 24 by 7 by 365. And that's why the trachea has to be open all the time. And that's why the trachea, the covering of trachea is made up of cartilage. As cartilage is harder than the muscular structure, as we know, that's why the trachea will remain open all the time. That's why the trachea is covered with a C-shaped cartilage. So this is cartilage. So, and of course, inside the trachea is covered with mucous membrane, as you can see here. The same kind of mucous membrane having the mucus secreting cells, the mucus secreting glands, and the cilia, small hair-like projection called as cilia. You can see the cross section of the trachea and the esophagus. This is the front part. The blue part is the cartilage, and the inside pink part is the mucous membrane. And you can see this is the dividing section between the esophagus and the trachea, and immediately behind that the esophagus is located. And now I hope that you are familiar with dhauti aspect of kriya. So when we do dhauti, for example, the vastra dhauti or vaman dhauti or danda dhauti, as we know that the water in case of danda dhauti and vaman dhauti will gush out of the esophagus, when we after we drink the water, and it comes out in the upward manner in the force. That force will be transmitted to the trachea here. You understand that? The thin layer, which is muscular layer, that force, upward force, will be transferred to trachea. And that's why the excess secretions from the trachea also will come out with water. When the water comes out in danda dhauti or vaman dhauti is more pronounced, because danda dhauti is physical stimulation, because the danda made up of rubber goes inside that esophagus. So that will stimulate in more enhanced way as compared with just vaman dhauti. So that will stimulate the trachea, so that whatever extra secretion or impurities are there in trachea, they will come out along with the water when the water is thrown out. Similarly, when we are doing vastra dhauti, as we remove the vastra, as we start removing the vastra, again the trachea will be stimulated, and even the mucus from the respiratory system also will come out. Because that question is raised many times, that when we are teaching the kriyas, I think there are going to be lectures on kriyas also in your class also. So when we say that some of the kriyas, for example, when we talk about therapeutical aspects of yoga, when we say that the dhauti kriyas are very good for treating asthma patients. So why it is because in dhauti kriyas are for digestive system, not for any other system. As we know that dhauti is a washing kriya specifically for digestive system, because the water or whatever that cloth enters the digestive system, not respiratory system. But still it has got indirect effect on the respiratory system as well. And that's why we need to understand this anatomy very well. And once we understand this anatomy, we know the logic behind the effect of those kriyas. So those kriyas, the main effect is, of course, the removal of impurities from the digestive system. At the same time, it helps us to remove the impurities or excess secretion from the respiratory system as well. Now we'll go to the respiratory system itself. This is the critical part of the lungs called as alveoli. As you can see, as we have discussed that, there's a trachea, then bronchi, bronchioles, and at the tip of the bronchiole, there are structures called as sac-like structures called as alveoli. There are tiny sacs. As you can see this cross section, there are tiny sacs made up of very thin epithelium. Epithelium is a term given to the cells which are covering any part of the body. It is called as epithelium. So this is the thin epithelial covering sac-like structure called as alveoli. As you can see, small opening of the bronchiole in the alveoli. So these are called as air sacs in common language, air sacs. So, and then again, these are supplied with the blood vessels, as you can see here, the arteries and veins, the capillaries, they are called as capillaries. Capillaries are tiny blood vessels, both arteries and veins, and they are supplying to this alveoli. So as you can see here, I think you will better perceive in the next diagram. So these alveoli and these capillaries are in very close proximity, as you can see here. This network of capillaries here around the alveoli. This is the place where the exchange of air takes place. Exchange of air takes place between the alveoli and the capillaries. And these are again the inside of the alveoli, as you can see here. It's like a bunch of grapes attached to one small part of the bronchiole. So that means that there are a large number of alveoli located inside our lungs. There are a very big number of alveoli, very tiny structures located. And this is a structure which is important for the exchange of air. And just a passing reference, because this ongoing pandemic, the alveoli get damaged. The alveoli get damaged. That's why the exchange of air cannot take place properly. And that's why you must have heard that the oxygen level starts falling because of COVID-19 infection. And that is the reason, because the oxygen is there in the air, but the body is not able to intake that because of damage to the alveoli here. Alveoli are so important structures. Just a passing reference, because alveoli will get damaged in other diseases of the lungs also, but just a passing reference to the current topic of COVID. Now, just for the sake of division, the respiratory system is divided into two parts. One is called as the respiratory tract, for that matter, the upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract consists of nasal cavity, the pharynx and larynx, and the lower respiratory tract consists of trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. Why this is important? Because as we come to the therapy part, there are certain infections which are called as upper respiratory tract infections. That means that they will affect only the upper respiratory tract and less on the lower respiratory tract. And that's why it is divided into two parts. We need to know about that. And usually, as we see that whenever we get an attack of cold, there is a nasal inflammation. And that cold later on gets converted to cough, and then it might get later on converted to bronchitis or any other disease of the lungs also. So the infection passes from the upper respiratory tract to lower respiratory tract. But because of structures here, because of defensive mechanism of body, most of the times the infection does not pass to the lower respiratory tract. It gets limited to the upper respiratory tract. There is important aspect again of the protection of the important structures of the body, which are very critical structures. So usually the upper respiratory tract infection, if the immunity is proper, if the proper treatment is undertaken, then it will not pass to the lower respiratory tract. So that's why these two divisions we need to know, especially when we talk about therapy aspects of the respiratory system. We'll see this complicated picture of the thoracic cavity here. Now here you can see that just to know the location of the heart and the lungs inside the thoracic cavity, the lungs are pulled on the side, as you can see, because they are attached some strings and they have pulled the lungs aside, so the heart is seen here. So this portion in between two lungs is called as mediastinum. You need not remember that, but just for the information, it's called as mediastinum, the gap between two lungs. And in this mediastinum, the heart and these big blood vessels are located, called as aorta. As you can see, the aorta is a very big blood vessel which starts from the heart and it supplies the blood to the whole body. So these are structures located in mediastinum, and there is a right side lung, left side lung, and as you can see, this is a diaphragm. The diaphragm is dome-like structure. As you can see that the right side diaphragm is slightly raised as compared to left side diaphragm, because there is a liver located on the right side of the body. Here, just below this part, the liver is located in the abdominal cavity. That's why the right side of the diaphragm is slightly raised as compared to the left side of the diaphragm. So this is just for showing you how the structures are located in the thoracic cavity. We'll talk about lungs now. As you can see, this is a diagram of the left lung and right lung. And these are the bronchi and bronchioles. Now there is a covering of the lungs called as pleura. It's called as pleura. So just like nervous system, you must learn that there are certain layers of covers outside the brain. You must have learned about that. So there are two layers of pleura which are covering the lungs. One is called as the visceral pleura and one is called as the parietal pleura. Visceral pleura is the pleura inside and parietal pleura is the pleura outside. Now this outside pleura is connected closely with the rib cage from inside. The thoracic cage, this pleura is attached to the thoracic cage from inside. And we will very soon know the significance of that. So there is outer layer, inner layer, and there is a fluid which is circulating through the pleura. It's called a pleural fluid. The pleural fluid, a very small amount of fluid circulating just around the lungs. So pleural fluid works as a shock absorption. It protects the lungs from the friction. What will happen if the pleural fluid is less or it leaks out due to injury? The lungs will have direct friction with the rib cage inside, and the lungs are going to get damaged because lungs are sponge-like tissues. They are elastic tissues. So they should not get damaged, so that pleura is there. Now you can see these two figures here, 756 and 760. As we know 760 mm of Hg is the atmospheric pressure. Normal atmospheric pressure on the earth is 760 mm of Hg. Here inside the lungs also it is shown as 760 mm of Hg, and that's why this figure called as 0 mm of Hg. So there is no difference between the atmospheric pressure of the lungs and that of the outside air, so that the air will not come in, also air will not go out also, because there is a zero difference between the atmospheric pressure of the lungs and the air outside. Now the pleural fluid has got -4 mm. That means that the pressure in the pleura is slightly less as compared to intrapulmonary pressure. So even though it is not part of the anatomy, we can discuss at this point of time that how the respiration, how the breathing takes place. When we'll just discuss the mechanism of expansion of rib cage and the movement of diaphragm a bit later on. But basically, the breathing mechanism consists of the expansion of this part of the lungs outside or area outside the lungs. And once the rib cage expands, then what happens that there is a negative pressure in this pleura that increases slightly. Because as we know, this parietal pleura is attached to the inside part of the thoracic cage. So that cannot move. So when the thoracic cage expands, there will be slight expansion of this pleural cavity that will lead to the more negative pressure in this pleura. And because of that, the lungs will expand, because now the lungs will be pulled outside. As we know, the tissue will flow, the elastic tissue will flow from greater pressure to lesser pressure. There is less pressure here. The pressure gets reduced because of the rib cage expands. Now there is no other way for the lungs but to expand. This is the mechanism of expansion of lungs. And once the lungs expand, the atmospheric pressure inside the lungs will reduce. As we know that the atmospheric pressure and the volume are inversely proportional to each other. Correct? If the volume is less, the pressure is more, volume is more, pressure is less. You know, it is a basic logic which is there in the physics or a common sense also. If we expand something, the pressure will reduce. Now, when the lungs expand like that, because the thoracic cage expands, what will happen is that the pressure inside the lungs will no longer be 760. It will become 759 -1. And once the pressure here is less,
it is responsible for expansion and contraction because
yes,
of that.
Yeah. So once the lungs expand, the pressure falls down inside the lungs, and that pressure is less than that of the atmospheric pressure, and that's why the air from outside will be drawn inside. This is just a mechanical process of the intake of the air inside. Then what happens that when the pressure inside the lungs will increase, when the rib cage will relax. When the rib cage will relax, this pressure inside the pleura also will come back to normal, and that will induce to lungs to go back to their normal state. So the pressure inside the lungs will increase, so that the air will be thrown out from the lungs to the air. Right? This is a mechanism of the air coming from outside the body, inside the body, and from inside the body transferred to outside of the body.
सर तुम्हाला थांबवतो जरा इकडे जरा तुम्हाला पण आराम मिळेल आणि
the lungs, and that is responsible for either inhalation or exhalation of the air from outside to inside and inside to outside. One more picture of the pleura. As you can see that this is a covering of the pleura outside the lungs. So lungs are not seen there, only covering is seen. And these are the arteries called as internal thoracic arteries. As we know that each and every part of the body, every tissue of the body has to be supplied by the blood so that they can function properly. So these are the arteries. Just for the sake of showing you how the pleura are covering the lungs, I have included this diagram. Now we'll go to the apparatus of the breathing. So this is the thoracic cage. You must have studied that when you studied the skeletal system. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae. As you can see, this vertebral column behind. Vertebral column is at the back. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae. And each vertebra is connected with one rib on one side. There is a pair of ribs. So there are two projections of each vertebra where the ribs will start. The ribs will start from the vertebra. They will come around the thoracic tract. They are again C-shaped in C-shaped structures, and then there is a sternum in between. As you can see, there is a very large bone called as sternum. We can feel that sternum in the chest here. It is a very large bone, a sternum, which is a protection for the anterior part of the thoracic cavity. And ribs will join the sternum through cartilage. This blue color is cartilage. As you must have perceived in each and every diagram, the blue color denotes the cartilage. This is a cartilaginous structure. So this is the important structure of that thoracic cage, which allows us to breathe in and breathe out. So this is the from the side you can see this is a sternum, and the ribs are attached here. Now there are two ribs behind, as you can see the downwards. These are the two ribs which are called as hanging ribs. Hanging ribs because they don't join the sternum; they are just located on the back side. And then these the ribs starting from the upper rib 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The 7 ribs will connect directly to the sternum with the cartilage, and the remaining 3 ribs they connect indirectly with the sternum. Why? That will become clear when we go to the next diagram. So this is a diagram of the thoracic cage, and this serves as a protection for the structures in the thoracic cavity, and this is the main structure because of which we are able to breathe in and breathe out. So this is the rib cage. So just visualize this structure when we discuss the physiology of breathing. Now there are muscles of respiration. One is the diaphragm. We have seen briefly diaphragm in one of the diagrams before. So diaphragm, the intercostal muscles between the ribs, and the secondary muscles or scalene muscles are the muscles of respiration. So we'll just discuss about them. The diaphragm, which we had seen in the earlier picture, dome-like structure, which separates the abdominal and thoracic cavity. As you can see here, even though the thoracic cage is up to here, the diaphragm doesn't start here. The diaphragm starts here, just at the lower end of the sternum. And it's a dome-like structure or a parachute-like structure. This is the diaphragm which is seen from below. Visualize, the diaphragm is seen from below, and there are certain openings in the diaphragm. Why the openings are there? Because the esophagus passes through the diaphragm, then certain large blood vessels pass through the diaphragm. So there are openings in the diaphragm, but those openings are completely sealed because anything from thoracic cavity cannot pass to the abdominal cavity, vice versa, but only through the esophagus and the blood vessels, not any other structure. So these are sealed openings there. So this is how the diaphragm looks from below. As you can see, there is a central tendon. As you can see this light structure. As we know, you have studied muscular system. Tendon are the stiff structure. End of the muscle is made up of tendon. And this tendon is there in between the diaphragm. Diaphragm is a very peculiar muscle. Diaphragm is a unique muscle of the body. It is a very peculiar. It is attached to the vertebra from behind and the thoracic cage from the sides. And then it inserts itself in this central tendon. So all the muscle fibers are coming around like this from all over the sides, 360 degrees, and they are merging into this central tendon. And this is the peculiar function. Because this structure leads to peculiar function of the diaphragm. In the first lecture we had discussed the structure is made for the function, and function is due to the structure. Because this peculiar structure of the diaphragm leads to a peculiar function of the diaphragm. These are intercostal muscles. We have seen the picture of the ribs. This is one rib, this is second rib. So these are 3 layers of muscles which are in between the ribs called as intercostal muscles. So there are 3 layers, and as you can perceive here, they are crisscross arrangement. They are not in one direction. The outer muscles are in one direction, and the inner muscles, middle muscles are exactly in the opposite direction. And these serve a particular function. That's why these are made again. So these are the transverse thoracic muscles which are connecting here to the ribs. So these are called intercostal muscles. And the third aspect of respiratory or breathing muscles is the secondary muscles. This is called as scalene muscles. As you can see in this diagram, scalene muscles are coming from the cervical vertebrae and are connecting to the upper two ribs. So naturally, when these 2 muscles contract, the upper 2 ribs will get lifted up. Right? The upper 2 ribs will get lifted because these are attached to the ribs, the upper 2 ribs here, the muscles. And the secondary muscles are sternocleidomastoid, a large muscle. When we turn the neck on one side, we can feel that or we can see that muscle, sternocleidomastoid. It is attached to the sternum here, this bone. So when we are using these muscles, secondary muscles of respiration, because of this, the clavicles or this clavicle, when these are attached to the clavicle here, as you can see, you can feel that bone here called as clavicle. That clavicle will get lifted up a little bit when we are utilizing these muscles for respiration, and that's how the rib cage will further expand. And these are the pectoral muscle, pectoralis minor and major, the chest muscle and the back muscle. These are also secondary muscles of respiration. That's why the respiration or secondary muscles of respiration are not only in the neck, but they are in the upper part of the chest also and upper part of the back also. So they are all linked together. As you can see, the diaphragm here. So the lower lips, which are indirectly joined to the sternum, they lie in the abdominal area, not in the thoracic area. Abdominal area. As you can see here, the diaphragm is attached here. These are the lungs, section of the lungs, and this is the diaphragm. As you can see, it's a very thick muscle called as diaphragm. The nerve supply of the respiratory system, it comes from the intercostal nerves and phrenic nerves, just the terminology. Phrenic nerve is the nerve which comes from C3, C4, C5. We should know as yoga therapist about the nomenclature of the vertebrae. Nomenclature of vertebrae. C means cervical vertebrae. So this nerve starts from the cervical vertebrae. As we know that there are two classifications of nerves coming out from the nervous system. One is the pairs of cranial nerve, which we have discussed earlier, and one is the pair of the coming out from the vertebra. In between two vertebra, the pair of nerves will come out. So these are two types of nerves which come out from the brain or which come out from the nervous system. So these phrenic nerves are coming out from C3, C4, and C5 vertebrae. Then there are intercostal nerves. T means thoracic. Thoracic first vertebra and thoracic 12 vertebra. In between these thoracic vertebrae, the pairs of nerves are coming out. So this is the supply of the nervous supply of the respiratory system. And one of the important aspects to remember is that the only pleural layer is sensitive to pain. Only the pleural layer is sensitive. Why? If the fluid pressure increases there, that is detrimental to the working of the lungs. Lungs is a critical part of the body, critical part of the system. That's why pain can be perceived only in the pleura. The pain cannot be perceived in the bronchi or pain cannot be perceived in the alveoli. It can be perceived only in the pleura. As we know that even in the stomach part, normally we will not perceive anything happening in the stomach. We have discussed that last time. If there is some irritation of the stomach, then we'll perceive that. Otherwise, we'll not perceive that. Otherwise, this is a part of the autonomic nervous system. It is the automatic regulation of the body. So there is a pulmonary plexus, the networking of the nerves, and it is made up of the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system, which is called the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is a 10th cranial nerve, comes from the cranium and passes through the lower part of the abdomen. Vagus nerve is the parasympathetic nerve. So basically, the function of the respiration is because of autonomous nervous system, which drives that function. Not it cannot be done consciously, at least routinely. Routine breathing is happening automatically. This is the blood supply or connection between the cardiac system and the pulmonary system, cardiopulmonary. So as we can see here, in this diagram is very clear. The left ventricle, I hope you have studied circulatory system. The left ventricle contains the oxygenated blood. Please don't use the words called as pure blood and impure blood. There's nothing like pure blood and impure blood. In common terms, we call it pure and impure blood because we feel that the blood flowing from the arteries is pure blood and the blood flowing through the veins is impure blood. It's not pure or impure, it's the oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood. So arteries will contain oxygenated blood and the veins will contain deoxygenated blood. There is the only difference. So this oxygenated blood is coming out here, as you can see here, and then only the pulmonary veins and arteries is reverse. The pulmonary veins will contain the oxygenated blood and the pulmonary arteries will contain deoxygenated blood. This is the blood supply between the lungs and the heart. Can you see this in diagram? Lungs and heart. So these are connected. As we can see that the blood, the oxygenated blood will flow to the heart through the pulmonary vein. It comes to the heart and then it comes to this ventricle, and through this ventricle, through the aorta, it gets pumped to the whole part of the body, different parts of the body. The mechanism of relationship between the circulatory system and the respiratory system. The network of, as we have seen earlier, network of the arteries and veins and capillaries inside the lungs, as we can see in this picture. This is the heart. This is a large vein called as vena cava, and this is a large artery called as ventricle. These are the main arteries and veins which supply to the whole body. So now we'll go to the function of the respiratory system. These are the main functions of the respiratory system: intake of the oxygen, the assimilation of oxygen inside the body, removal of carbon dioxide and other toxic gases from the body, regulation of the temperature of the body, regulation of water balance. As we know that the water vapor also passes through the breath. It is thrown out of the body if there is excess vapor inside the breath. Then maintenance of pH of the body. So pH has to be critically maintained inside the body. So respiratory system is one of the system which is responsible for maintenance of pH. It is also responsible for speech and olfaction, that is smell. The spatial sensory organs, which we call as Jnanendriya in our philosophical language. So it is part of Jnanendriya also because the system is able to recognize the smell, olfaction. Now there are two aspects of respiration. One is the external and other is internal. It should be external respiration and internal respiration, because technically speaking, the external respiration is called as breathing and the internal cell level is called as respiration or cell level breathing. So whatever, so these are probably reversible terms. So external breathing is, or external respiration is inhalation and exhalation. That is the air coming to the lungs and the air coming out of the lungs. It's called as external respiration, and the internal respiration is called as cell breathing. So that is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide at the level of cell. So we'll come to that. The external breathing, there are two aspects of that. One is the taking the breath in or taking the air in, and other is taking the air out. Taking the air in is called as breathing, inhalation or inspiration in the scientific language. Inspiration is the process of intake of air containing more oxygen relatively or compared with the exhaled air. And the exhalation, breathing out or expiration, is the process of throwing out the air containing more of carbon dioxide as compared with the inhaled air. So that doesn't mean that the inhaled air doesn't have carbon dioxide or exhaled air doesn't have oxygen. It's not that. It's just a relative difference between the oxygen and carbon dioxide. And in yogic terms, we call them as Shvasa Prashvasa. Shvasa is the inhalation, Prashvasa is the exhalation. There is a yogic language. Now this is how the expansion of the lung takes place, as we have discussed earlier, that the pleural space will increase because the rib cage or the thoracic cage will expand. So in normal breathing, there are two aspects of this function. One is the contraction of the intercostal muscles. As you can see in this diagram, when the intercostal muscles will contract, the ribs will come near to each other, right? The rib, because we need to understand that sometimes we feel reverse. So when the muscles are contracted, the ribs will come near to each other. Now there is not much leeway for the ribs to move because ribs are attached at the back in the vertebra and front to the sternum. But they are attached to the sternum through the cartilage, and that's why there is a scope for movement a little bit. And because of that movement, the rib cage will get expanded because of the contraction of the intercostal muscles. We'll see the diagram further. And the second aspect is the contraction of the diaphragm. Can you see here? This is the inhalation, the exhalation. Inhalation, the rib cage is expanded, as you can see in this picture. The diaphragm goes up. Sorry, the diaphragm comes down. In inhalation, the rib cage expands because of the contraction of intercostal muscles. When the diaphragm contracts, diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle. When it contracts, it comes down. it comes down so that the rib cage is expanded, and that's why there's less pressure inside the lungs, as we have seen earlier. And so that's why the air from the atmosphere will come inside the lungs. And the reverse will happen during the exhalation. The intercostal muscles will relax, the diaphragm will relax so that the rib cage contracts a little bit, or rather it relaxes. So basically, the muscles are meant for inhalation. These are the inhalation muscles, and exhalation is because only of relaxation. So the inhalation is the active process in normal breathing. Exhalation is the passive process in normal breathing. We have to understand that. So inhalation is because of contraction of the muscles, it is the active process, and exhalation is because of relaxation. Once the intercostal muscles relax, the ribs will again be taken apart, and again the size of the rib cage will be less. The diaphragm will be thrown up because it relaxes, it goes up, and that's why the air gets pushed out of the lungs. This is the process of inhalation and exhalation. This is typically called as bucket handle movement or pump handle movement. Just like the handle of the pump or a handle of the bucket, the rib cage expands and its rib cage contracts. We should not say contract, but it relaxes. Again, the same thing, the inspiratory muscles contract, the diaphragm descends, rib cage rises. Now the ribs will expand toward the side and little bit up, side and up, and the diaphragm will go down. Diaphragm will go down. The lungs are getting stretched because lungs are elastic tissues. Lungs are elastic tissues, so lungs will get stretched. Because of the stretch of the lung, the intrapulmonary volume will increase. The pressure will drop, as is shown here, minus 1 mm. The difference is only 1 mm. And that will lead to inflow of the air inside the lungs. And then the air comes inside, the difference becomes zero. Difference becomes zero, so no further air will come inside the lungs. Correct? And now the exhalation will start in the form of relaxation of the muscles. Relaxation of the muscles. So this is the process. Yes.
ये जो 1 mm Hg जो है वो नॉर्मल लोगों के लिए, कॉमन लोगों के लिए होगा, और योगी के लोगों के लिए तो अलग रहेगा थोड़ा सा, मे बी.
बट दिस इज द योगिक लोगों में तो भी वो जब योग नहीं करते थे तभी नॉर्मल ब्रीदिंग शुरू रहता है ना उनका, तो तभी उतना ही रहेगा. But they are capable of much more, developing much more difference in the pressure, because they have not only yogic people, but other people like sportsmen or those who are doing exercises, even those people are capable of that. क्योंकि वो लोग के भी क्या होता है, again that topic will come later on. The respiration depends on the health of the muscles. As we have seen, it's just an interplay of muscles. अगर मसल्स अच्छे काम करते हैं तो सांस प्रश्वास अच्छा होगा. मसल्स में कुछ डिफेक्ट है तो श्वास प्रश्वास नहीं होगा अच्छी तरह से. तो मसल्स का टोनिंग अप होने के लिए एक्सरसाइज करना जरूरी है, especially for the secondary muscles or respirations, because normal breathing में, as we have discussed, only two types of muscles will take part: the intercostal muscles and diaphragm. The neck muscles and secondary muscles don't participate in normal breathing process. They are not required. Whenever we are running or whenever we are doing some exercise, extra blood is required, extra glucose is required, or extra oxygen is required for the tissues. And then what will happen, that all these other muscles will come into a picture. Then the contraction will be enhanced of all the muscles. That's why the rib cage will be expanded more as compared with normal breathing. And if the muscles are working properly, the muscle tone is proper, the muscle strength is proper, then only this can happen. And that's why yogic people, as you said, yogic people, those who are doing their sadhana daily, the pranayama sadhana, even asana sadhana, any sadhana, so their muscles are toned up in a better way as compared to other people. And that's why they can have that kind of extra expansion of extra intake of air, which will happen during pranayama. We'll discuss that when we discuss pranayama. But otherwise, normally, only this action will take only -1 difference of pressure in normal breathing. The same thing shown in the diagram, because I have purposely repeated this diagram, different type of diagrams, because we need to understand that. As you can see that the diaphragm contracts, it comes down, the diaphragm relaxes, it goes up, right? Intercostal muscles here, they are relaxing, they are contracting. This is the difference shown. As you can see in this diagram, the chest expansion and it comes back to normal. see a small video clip. This is a real-time MRI video clip. So these are all interdependent things like expansion and contraction, relaxation of the muscles. At the same time, the working of the heart. So this rhythm of the respiration is intricately linked with the rhythm of the heart, which is shown in this video. So just see, no need to explain that. As you can see, the heart is beating, the diaphragm is moving up and down, the ribcage expanding and relaxing, and there is a rhythm which connects the rhythm of the heart and the rhythm of the respiration. You can see in this picture, in this video, right? So yes, sir. Mute है तुमचा.
Once more वो video.
Pardon? You want to see it again?
Yeah.
Yeah. A very short video available on the internet. Nothing special about it. But it's the real-time MRI video. That's why you can see all the expansion and relaxation, everything very clearly in this. So we'll not go into details of that, but the purpose is that this rhythm of heart and rhythm is of the lungs is intricately linked together. So basically, there is a particular rhythm of the respiration, and that is not only linked to the heart, but is linked to all the systems of the body. And that's how, when we control the rhythm of the respiration, all the systems of the body can be controlled. That's why it is called, the pranayama is called a very important yoga sadhana. Because through pranayama, we can control the respiration, we can control or we can alter the rhythm of the respiration, and through that, we can alter the rhythm of all the systems of the body. That's the only thing which I want to show you in this video. So in short, normal breathing is the active process. In normal breathing, the inhalation is the active process and exhalation is a passive process. So थोड़ा time ज़्यादा लगेगा, चलेगा ना? It's already nearly 3:30. Okay. So it is called a diffusion of the gases. The gases have got a property of diffusion. The gases can diffuse from one place to another place. As we know that the gases have got a property of diffusion, and this is nothing but the diffusion of the gases from one place to other places. So exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between lungs and the blood vessels, and oxygen from atmospheric air to the blood via the lungs. These are transportation of oxygen inside the body from the atmosphere to the blood via lungs. So lungs are intermediaries. जो आजकल जो हम हमेशा डिस्कस करते हैं ना, they are in between people. So they are in between system, which is the responsible system for intake of oxygen from the atmosphere to the tissues via blood. And carbon dioxide is and again waste gases and vapors which are transferred from blood to the lungs and then thrown out of the body. So to atmosphere from the lungs, this is the function of the exchange of gases of respiratory system or diffusion of gases. This is how the diffusion of gases takes place in the alveoli. This is the alveoli. The section of alveoli, as you can see here, this is the alveoli. This is the alveoli. This is the blood vessel here. Blood vessel, which contains the red blood cells, RBCs. You can see here, red blood cells. And there are particular kind of cells which are covering the alveoli from inside. You can see that pneumocyte, type 2 and type 1. There are two pneumocytes. These are the cells which are responsible for the exchange of gases, which are located. They are located, of course, in this picture, they are shown apart, but they are located near to each other. There are a lot of numbers there. So now what will happen here is that now after we inhale, the oxygen pressure inside the alveoli is much more as compared to the oxygen pressure inside the red blood cells. As we know that the oxygen is bound to the iron inside the RBCs. Right? It gets bound to the inside the RBCs, and that's how the oxygen gets transported in the blood from one place to other place through the red blood cells. You can see here, these are the RBCs which contain more carbon dioxide, and that's how the carbon dioxide from the RBCs or the blood will go to the alveoli, and the oxygen from the alveoli will be transported or diffused to the blood. There is a very thin separation wall. The cover of the alveolar sac is very thin. That's why gases can pass through from one side to the other side. As we know, there are some spaces between the cell and through which the gases will pass. It's similar to the process of absorption in the digestive tract. We have discussed that in the intestines, the digested food goes from the intestines to the blood vessels. Similar to that, there is called as osmosis because those are the molecules of glucose and other molecules. Here it is gases. So gases is called as diffusion of the gases. So it's the blood flow. So this is how the exchange of gas takes place. So oxygenated red blood cell, when the oxygen combines with the iron of the red blood cell, it's called as oxygenated red blood cell. So that goes to the body parts, all the cells of the body. So this is how the oxygen gets transported to all the cells of the body. This is the exchange of air inside the alveoli and the capillaries, inside the lungs. So the oxygen pressure inside the blood is 100 ml, and now this is the internal respiration from the cell and the blood. So now the blood vessels have taken up the oxygen from the alveoli, and then blood is circulating to all the tissues of the body, all the cells of the body. Now, after inhalation, the oxygen pressure inside the blood is 100 mm, and that inside tissues is 40 mm, and that's how the oxygen from the blood goes to the tissues. So the first part of the respiration, the external respiration, is the diffusion process. Physical diffusion of the gases from one place to other. And the tissue respiration or cell respiration is the biochemical process. Where some reaction, the biological and chemical reaction takes place. This is the reaction called as glycolysis. So I am not very well versed with chemistry, but this is the reaction of that. So now we have got glucose in the blood. We have taken enough food. The glucose is there in the blood already, but that glucose is required for the cells to produce energy. And unless oxygen is present, the cells cannot utilize that glucose. Oxygen is required for that. So these 6 molecules of oxygen and 1 molecule of glucose that will produce carbon dioxide, H2O, that is water, and plus energy. It is called as heat here, but there is energy which is required for the function of the cell. And now the cell will store this energy in the form of a molecule called as ATP. ATP is the name of the molecule, it is a complex molecule. So the cell will store the energy in the form of ATP. For formation of ATP, this reaction between glucose and oxygen is required, glycolysis. Then only the ATP will be produced. There is other mechanism which we will not discuss, of course, here. It's called an anaerobic mechanism, where without the oxygen also they will produce ATP, but that will be to the much lesser extent as compared to what is the process here with the help of oxygen. This is the ATP. Now, as we can see that the cells utilize oxygen, and the process of the reaction, the carbon dioxide is a product of that reaction, and plus water. So the excess water is required for the body. So any extra water produced here will be thrown out of the lungs as a vapor, and the carbon dioxide will come back to the RBCs. So that will become deoxygenated blood. So more carbon dioxide that will again go to the alveoli, that will be transferred to alveoli and thrown out of the body. These are the waste products which are to be thrown out of the body. This is the internal respiration. The transportation of carbon dioxide. So it is called as carboxyhemoglobin, and with oxygen is called as oxyhemoglobin. So hemoglobin contains iron. Hemoglobin is present inside the RBCs, and oxygen and carbon dioxide combine with hemoglobin, and that's how they are transported to different parts of the body. The rate of breathing, the normal respiratory rate in the adults is around 14 to 16. Young children, the newborns will breathe at nearly 45 per minute. We'll see that the newborns breathing is very fast. As we grow up, we settle down to this kind of breathing rate. Now, the muscles of the respiration, they are skeletal muscles. We know the difference between skeletal muscles and smooth muscles. The smooth muscles are driven by the autonomous nervous system, and skeletal muscles are driven by the cerebral cortex. But the respiratory muscles are controlled by autonomous system. They are controlled by autonomous system normally. But since they are skeletal muscles, they can be controlled partially. And this is the principle of doing pranayam. The principle of doing pranayam is that at least for some time, the cortex will supersede the autonomous control of the muscles so that we can control the respiration. We can control the inhalation, we can control the exhalation, or we can stop the inhalation and exhalation for some time. That is a cortical control because that is partly controllable. But basically, the deciding factor in the respiratory rate is the concentration of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the blood. In the next 1 or 2 slides, we'll see the neural regulation of the respiratory system, which is done by the medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is sensitive to the concentration of oxygen as well as carbon dioxide in the blood. They are called as chemoreceptors inside the medulla oblongata. The chemoreceptors will detect the chemical composition of blood. But we need to remember one thing, that the medulla is much more sensitive to carbon dioxide than the oxygen. If the carbon dioxide increases in the blood, immediately the medulla oblongata will hasten up the speed of the breathing so that carbon dioxide has to be thrown out of the body all the time. And then only the oxygen can combine with the RBCs. If there is more carbon dioxide, there is no place for the oxygen to combine with the RBCs. And that's why excess of carbon dioxide, if it's built up in the blood, it has to be thrown out of the body immediately. So what it will do is that it will send signal to the muscles to contract fast. So the rate will increase. So there will be more carbon dioxide thrown out of the body and more oxygen can enter in the body. If there is less oxygen in the blood, the same thing will be initiated. But it is more sensitive to carbon dioxide than oxygen. And this is the, the figures. The nitrogen in the inhaler and exhaler is the same. Oxygen is 20% in inhaler and 16% exhaler. So it is the play of only 4%. Only 4%. The exhaler also contains a lot of oxygen, but body doesn't require so much oxygen. It requires only 4%. And this is a principle which we use when we revive a person who is unconscious, called as mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So probably many people are aware of that nowadays, because if the person is unconscious, if he stops breathing, the person who revives that person, he has to blow the exhaled air inside his mouth, because that contains 16% oxygen, and that's how we can supply oxygen to that person who has stopped breathing. So there is only difference between difference of 4%. The speech is regulated by vocal cords. Vocal cords are folds of mucous membrane inside the larynx. We have seen that earlier. And the vocal cords will vibrate and they will produce a sound. And oscillation of vibration is controlled by the flow of the air. So the flow of the air is regulated, and through that the speech is produced. So of course, this is a very complex mechanism of production of speech. And since the size of the larynx is different in male and female, there is a difference between the depth of the voice of males and females. The males have a deeper voice because their larynx is larger as compared with females. And then there are certain exercises to be done of the vocal cords to improve the speech. And the vocal cords also are affected because of Ujjayi pranayam. So we'll come to that later. So that's why speech is one of the functions of the respiratory system. Cough reflex, we have seen that sneezing reflex when we discuss in the nasal cavity. As we can see in this diagram, the inside of the trachea is covered of the mucous membrane, mucous glands, as well as this cilia, very thin hairs. You can see this hair here, and the hairs, the cilia have got a movement. They are moving all the time. So whenever any dust particle comes in the inside the trachea or respiratory tract, the extra mucus will be secreted, and the cilia will throw away that object outside the respiratory tract. So this is called a cough reflex. So anything enters just top of the trachea, immediately the cough reflex will be stimulated, and there will be a complex action of the muscles to throw out that mucus and particle outside the body. And again, the same will be caused by accidental passage of food through trachea. As we know that epiglottis is attached to the, we have seen that epiglottis is attached to the larynx or this laryngeal cartilage. And now whenever we take the food inside, when the food goes inside the esophagus, the epiglottis will close the trachea. Epiglottis will close the trachea. So we cannot inhale and swallow at the same time. We cannot inhale or exhale and swallow at the same time. That's why if you're speaking and swallowing at the same time, what will happen is that while speaking, we need to exhale. We cannot speak when we are not exhaling. And when we exhale, the epiglottis will open up. And so there are chances of the food passing to the respiratory tract. And that is prevented by cough reflex. That's why आपण मराठीतून ठसका लागतो आपल्याला, आपण बरोबर खायला गेलो तर. That is the cause of that. The control is because of there are two sensors located, two types of sensors located inside the body. One is called as chemoreceptors. They detect the chemical composition of blood, oxygen and carbon dioxide. They are located at the medulla oblongata. And there are baroreceptors. They will detect the pressure of the blood inside. So they are located in the neck, carotid arteries, and aortic bodies. So these are two locations of baroreceptors. They detect the pressure inside the blood. And then there are stretch receptors in the alveoli. There are stretch receptors in the stomach also. Alveoli are the thin sacs, as we have seen of the air. When the alveoli stretch completely, the receptors will know that alveoli stretch optimum level. They will send a signal so that the alveoli cannot stretch more than that. If they overstretch, they are likely to get damaged. So there are stretch receptors present in the alveoli. And the control is from medulla oblongata, which is located at the back of the skull and is partly through the upper motor cortex, the cortical part of the brain, conscious part of the brain.